Lynn Brown.
Very grateful, Ms Mardell, and I have to say it's an absolute privilege to serve under your chairship for the very first time. I'm sure it won't be the last. Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for Chelmsford for securing this debate. She has a vast knowledge and a real passion for these issues that she's raised so effectively today. As we know, the UK had a key role in formulating the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think it's fair to say that we have a special responsibility, therefore, to support their achievement, both here and at home, and certainly internationally. And we're now more than halfway to the 2030 deadline. As we've heard, unless we see a real injection of energy, ambition, cooperation and leadership, we are so unlikely to meet most of our global commitments. Progress on many targets has stalled or even reversed. Last year, more young women were not in education, employment or training than in 2015. We've seen a massive drop in international finance to support developing countries, clean energy research and production. And worst of all, we're back at global hunger levels not seen since 2005. So last month, when the Deputy Prime Minister talked about getting the SDGs back on track, there was a bit of a relief, even just from having development back on the government's agenda somewhere. And I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing the government's International Development White Paper, because I hope it will contain clear detail on how the government is going to support the achievement of the global goals, particularly on extreme poverty and on climate change. And I hope it speeds up the transformation that we so need, so that partnerships can work together, hand in hand, to strengthen local development leadership. But how can that transformation happen when I fear that the government is stepping back from leadership on essential issues like climate change? In July, the Minister rightly said that the White Paper, and I quote, will set out how the government will lead the charge against extreme poverty and climate change. And that's very welcome. The impact of climate heating alongside COVID and rising violence are already proving a huge barrier to progress. But frankly, we're open to a charge of hypocrisy, because only last month the Prime Minister U-turned on crucial climate action here in the UK, backtracking on supporting the rapid shift we need and that British businesses want towards electrification of both car transport and home heating. And the Prime Minister doubled down on his refusal to stop new oil and gas developments in the North Sea, massively undermining our climate diplomacy. So it would be really useful to hear from the Minister how he thinks this helps the UK be seen as a credible partner at COP28. The reason I've pushed on this today is because so many of the SDGs will be impacted by climate change. We won't see resilient food systems or meet our global goal of ending hunger unless we scale up climate mitigation and adaptation. And we're not going to see an end to the conflict fuelled by increasingly scarce water and land resource. We've already seen the humanitarian catastrophes created by the combination of climate heating and conflict on vulnerable communities. The Minister knows that in East Africa, 65 million people are facing acute food insecurity. 65 million people. And there's terrible hunger already in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sudan, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, to name but a few. And as we speak, huge numbers of people are at risk of death by dehydration and starvation in Gaza because of the conflict. To quote my boss, there won't be a just and lasting peace until Israel is secure. Palestine is a sovereign state, and both Israelis and Palestinians enjoy dignity, security, and human rights. We cannot cannot surrender the hope of peace and two states living side by side. Globally, it's not just about conflict, food and climate change. I honestly think the government is failing to take a prevention-first approach to the problems that the world is facing. We are still basing our activities on an outdated idea of handouts, crumbs from the table of the rich to the poor. I think we need a different approach. Sudan taught us, surely, that we need to work with our partners to monitor and sanction those fueling violence. And I don't think we've learned enough lessons from Sudan, because we've not even mirrored all the US sanctions on actors fueling the bloodshed. And I honestly don't know why. Why haven't we sanctioned all of those responsible for funneling gold to Russia? Why? And the reason I say this is because our development approach isn't just about our spending. It's got to be about how our partnerships can support governments in low-income countries with their own investments, their own aims, their own ambitions to meet the SDGs. And there's much more we can do. I've raised the issue of unsustainable sovereign debt before, so I'm just going to say this. If a country is spending debilitating amounts of money paying off high interest loans, how can they possibly build resilience to climate change and develop desperately needed public services? Because their hands are tied behind their backs. The City of London has almost a unique importance in sovereign bond finance. So I think we need to build on these strengths, take a leadership role, and take serious action to tackle the debt crisis. And one last point, if I may. We need to look at the government's approach to sustainable development in health. The global maternal mortality ratio has barely declined since 2015, from 227 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births in 2015 to 223 deaths in 2020. That's obviously not good enough. In 2021, 5 million children died before reaching their 5th birthday, down from 6.1 million in 2015. It's difficult to celebrate that reduction when we know we could have done so much more. And we know 10 children under the age of 5 die every minute. Our progress to end HIV, tuberculosis and malaria is off track. In 2021, there were 1.5 million new HIV infections worldwide. There were 1.6 million deaths from TB, 600,000 malaria-related deaths. We can do better. We have world-leading universities and the expertise to work with partners around the world to strengthen global health security and defeat these epidemics once and for all. Our communities and so many people around the world need a government that will give us our future back. So let's remember, the world came together and discussed what it wanted the future to look like. In a joyful moment of cooperation and ambition, a global programme and goals were agreed. What a tragedy that we're sitting here just a few years away from when those goals were supposed to be achieved, with so much to do. We really do need a genuine commitment from our government to do so much better.